The night was quiet on Alcatraz, the island prison rising like a fortress from the icy waters of San Francisco Bay. Most prisoners were asleep in their cells, but three men were wide awake, moving carefully through the darkness. Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers, John and Clarence, had spent months planning what no one believed was possible, an escape from America's most secure prison. Guards called Alcatraz inescapable, the place where criminals lost hope and dreams died on cold concrete floors. But tonight, that belief would be tested. With makeshift tools hidden from the guards' eyes, the three men chipped away at the concrete walls of their cells. The sound was quiet but relentless, a slow scraping that echoed in their own minds more than anywhere else. Every noise could get them caught, every mistake could end their lives, and yet their determination pushed them forward. They had crafted dummy heads to fool the guards during nightly counts, leaving behind the illusion of sleeping men while they prepared for freedom. When the walls finally gave way, they crawled through narrow holes behind the cell vents, their bodies brushing against cold metal pipes. Time seemed to stretch into hours as they moved silently through the labyrinth of service corridors. Above them, the stormy wind whipped against the island, the water crashing against jagged rocks, as if nature itself was warning them to turn back. As they climbed up the final stairwell toward the roof, the enormity of what they were doing hit them. One slip, one misstep, and the icy waters below could claim them instantly. But the men pushed onward, dragging their handmade raft and life vests, prepared for the impossible swim to the mainland. Outside, the wind howled, the waves crashed. Alcatraz stood silent and imposing, its lights casting long shadows on the rocky shore. And then, as the first hints of dawn approached, the three men vanished into the darkness, slipping into the turbulent waters below. The morning revealed the empty cells. Guards were stunned. How could anyone escape this fortress? Panic spread through the prison. The warden called an emergency meeting. Every boat was searched, every shoreline scanned, but there was no trace of the men. Had they drowned in the freezing water, or were they truly free? No one knew. The question hung over the prison like a shadow. This wasn't just an escape. It was a challenge to the very idea of Alcatraz's power. For the first time, prisoners began to wonder if the impossible could actually happen. And while the authorities searched frantically for answers, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers were already ghosts, their fates a mystery that would haunt the prison for decades. But to truly understand how these men reached this point, how they dared to dream of freedom where so many had failed, we need to go back to the beginning, to the origins of Alcatraz, to the life inside its walls, and to the punishments and routines that shaped the men who dared to escape. Only then can we see the courage, the fear, and the cunning that led to one of America's most legendary prison escapes. And as the camera would follow every shadowed corridor, every barred window, we would realize this: nothing at Alcatraz was simple, and the next shocking twist was only waiting to emerge from the darkness. Alcatraz was in chaos. The guards scoured the island, shining flashlights into every corner, calling out names, counting heads over and over. But the three men, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers, were gone. Empty beds and dummy heads staring up at the ceiling were all that remained. The warden and his officers could hardly believe it. How had anyone escaped from the inescapable prison?
While authorities launched a massive manhunt across San Francisco Bay, the story of Alcatraz itself began to unfold. The island was designed to break men, not to hold them gently. From its early days as a military prison to its years as a federal penitentiary, Alcatraz became home to America's most dangerous criminals. Its concrete walls, steep cliffs, and icy waters made escape nearly impossible. Guards walked the catwalks with rifles at the ready, and every prisoner knew that a single mistake could mean months in solitary confinement or worse. Inside, life was harsh and regimented. Prisoners woke early, marched to breakfast, and performed menial work under watchful eyes. There was no privacy, there was no mercy. Punishments were severe for even small infractions. Breaking rules could mean being locked alone in a tiny, cold cell for days, receiving only a minimal meal. Violence between prisoners was common, and rival gangs constantly tested each other, while the guards remained strict but cautious. Every day, inmates learned the unspoken rule: trust no one, watch your back, and survive at any cost. It was in this environment that Frank and the Anglin brothers began to plot. Unlike many prisoners who gave up hope, they studied the routines of guards, memorized schedules, and improvised tools from materials they could hide. Their ingenuity was extraordinary. They sanded down ventilation grates, fashioned makeshift drills from spoons, and collected newspapers and raincoats to make a raft. For months, they worked in secret, knowing the smallest sound could end everything. And yet, the human element of Alcatraz often created small cracks in the prison's armor. Guards sometimes underestimated inmates. Prisoners became complacent, and routine distractions, like a loud argument in the dining hall, could hide weeks of work on a tiny escape tunnel. This combination of careful planning and the slightest oversight allowed Morris and the Anglins to achieve what had never been done before.
Back on that fateful night, as the waters claimed the darkness, the guards searched tirelessly. Boats and ferries patrolled the bay. Helicopters scanned the surface. But Frank, John, and Clarence seemed to disappear without a trace. Some feared the men had drowned in the icy currents, their bodies swallowed by the waves. Others whispered that they had made it to the mainland, blending into the city streets, free at last. The mystery would never be fully solved. To this day, no confirmed sighting of the men has ever been proven. And the repercussions inside Alcatraz were immediate and brutal. Prisoners who were suspected of aiding the escape faced intense interrogation and solitary confinement. Rules became stricter. Guards patrolled with renewed vigilance, locking cells earlier and inspecting every corner of the prison. Fear and suspicion settled over the inmates like a heavy fog. No one spoke freely. Trust vanished. Life inside Alcatraz became even more unbearable, a daily test of endurance and cunning. Yet, while the prison tightened its grip, the legend of the escape grew. Newspapers across the country ran headlines about the great Alcatraz escape, capturing the imagination of the public. People marveled at how anyone could outsmart the system, even for a moment. Inmates whispered stories, comparing their own attempts with the daring of Morris and the Anglins. Even in confinement, the idea of freedom lingered, a dangerous spark in a place built to extinguish hope. But Alcatraz was not finished teaching its lessons. While the escape captivated the outside world, inside the prison, life remained unforgiving. New prisoners arrived, hardened criminals who had survived murder charges, bank robberies, and violent gangs. They found themselves subject to the same relentless rules, the same cold concrete walls, and the same icy waters surrounding the island. And for those who dared to challenge authority, punishments could be devastating. Solitary confinement, deprivation of meals, and extreme isolation were daily realities. And so the question lingered over the prison. Were Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers truly free, or had the Bay claimed them forever? Authorities continued searching for months, following every lead, interviewing witnesses, and retracing the escape. But every investigation ended the same way: a mystery unsolved, a story unfinished. As the sun set over Alcatraz, casting long shadows across the island, the prison seemed to sigh, as if acknowledging its own failure. The escape would go down in history,
a reminder that even the most secure walls could be challenged. And inside, the remaining prisoners waited, watched, and whispered, knowing that life in the rock was as dangerous and unpredictable as the sea that surrounded it. But even as the island returned to its harsh routines, a new threat loomed, one that would push the limits of security and force Alcatraz to confront the darkest truths of its own system. What would happen when another daring plan emerged from the shadows? The answer would shock everyone who thought the rock could never be defeated again. The air on Alcatraz was heavy with tension. Guards doubled their patrols, inspecting every cell and corridor. Prisoners whispered nervously, glancing at each other with suspicion. The Great Escape had shaken the island to its core. The empty cells of Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers were a constant reminder that even the most secure prison could be challenged, and that nothing inside was guaranteed. For months, authorities chased every possible lead. Boats and ferries combed the bay, shoreline search parties combed the rocks, and police investigated reports from San Francisco to the far edges of the West Coast. But no trace of the escapees was ever confirmed. Some believed they have drowned in the icy waters, their bodies carried out to sea. Others insisted they had survived, blending into society, their freedom a secret the world would never uncover. The mystery grew, and with it, the legend of the Alcatraz escape.
Inside the prison, the impact was immediate and severe. Prisoners suspected of helping the escape were interrogated relentlessly, and some were punished with solitary confinement for weeks. Guards grew harsher, locking cells earlier, enforcing stricter routines, and watching every movement. Fear and mistrust became a permanent part of life on the rock. Even the smallest rule violations were met with harsh consequences, sending a message that rebellion, even in secret, would not go unpunished. But Alcatraz had a long history of testing men to their limits. Prisoners were subjected to extreme routines designed to break their spirit. Work in the laundry, kitchens, or on the docks was grueling, often under the watch of armed guards. Meals were minimal, cells were cold and stark, and sunlight was rare. Solitary confinement was the ultimate punishment, a tiny, windowless room where men could spend days or even weeks alone, stripped of almost all human contact. The goal was not just to punish, but to reshape behavior through isolation and fear. Yet, for all its harshness, Alcatraz could not fully extinguish hope. Prisoners observed the escape and began quietly admiring the ingenuity of Morris and the Anglin brothers. Their story became a symbol, whispered in the shadows of the island. Even here, behind bars and razor wire, the human spirit could find a way to challenge authority. Meanwhile, the public outside remained fascinated. Newspapers recounted every detail of the escape, from the clever use of dummy heads to the painstaking preparation of the raft. The story captivated Americans, who marveled at how anyone could outsmart the supposedly foolproof system of Alcatraz. For decades, the escape would be retold in books, documentaries, and films, ensuring that the legend lived far beyond the island itself.
Despite the attention, life inside the prison continued. New inmates arrived, hardened criminals who quickly learned that Alcatraz was unforgiving. Violent fights broke out between gangs, and guards responded swiftly and ruthlessly. Rules were enforced with precision, and punishments were harsh reminders of the cost of defiance. The escape of Morris and the Anglins served as both inspiration and warning. The desire for freedom could drive men to extraordinary lengths, but failure could mean unbearable consequences. Alcatraz itself became a character in this story, a looming fortress that tested every person who entered. Its isolation, surrounded by cold, treacherous waters, made escape nearly impossible. Its cells, small and stark, were designed to strip prisoners of hope. And yet, even here, ingenuity and courage sometimes triumphed. The island's reputation as America's most secure prison was both true and, in the case of the 1962 escape, not entirely unchallenged. As the sun set over the bay, casting a crimson glow on the water, Alcatraz seemed both serene and menacing. The story of Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers remained unsolved, a mystery that haunted the prison and captivated the nation. Every creaking stair, Every barred window and every icy gust of wind reminded the men inside that Alcatraz was a place of extremes, punishing yet legendary, unforgiving yet unforgettable. And for those who had once dreamed of escape, the legend lingered, whispering in the corridors of the rock. Freedom was possible, but only at unimaginable risk. And somewhere out in the world, 3 men might still be living the freedom they had risked everything to claim. Or the Bay might have finally claimed them. The truth remains a haunting question, echoing through history and reminding us all of the power, the danger, and the enduring mystery of Alcatraz. Alcatraz never forgot the escape of 1962. The prison tightened its security even more, adding new guards, new procedures, and extra inspections. Every prisoner knew the story, whispered in the shadows. 3 men had dared the impossible and had vanished into the freezing waters. Their disappearance became a warning. Freedom was tempting, but the cost could be deadly.
Even decades later, the mystery haunted the prison and the Bay. Investigators searched for clues, examining old letters, tips, and sightings. Some believed Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers had survived, living quietly somewhere on the mainland. Others insisted the currents had claimed them, and that the waters of San Francisco Bay were the final jail of the escapees. The uncertainty gave the story a life of its own, fueling books, documentaries, and debates. Inside Alcatraz, life continued, but the shadow of the escape lingered. Guards were more cautious, more fearful. Men were tighter about their plans. Solitary confinement remained the ultimate punishment, a place designed to strip men of hope and test their will. But the legend of Morris and the Anglins reminded everyone that even in a fortress designed to crush the human spirit, courage and cunning could shine. Alcatraz itself eventually closed in 1963, but its story remains alive. The island stands today as a historic site, visited by thousands who walk its cold halls, peer into its dark cells, and imagine the lives of those who were trapped within. The escape of Morris and the Anglins is the crown jewel of its history, a real-life event that proves truth can be stranger than fiction. For visitors, the wind still howls across the rocky shores, the waves crash against jagged rocks, and the cell blocks stand silent. It is easy to imagine the planning, the fear, and the hope that once filled the air. And somewhere in the shadows of history, the question still waits. Did the escapees make it, or did the Bay finally claim them? Alcatraz remains a symbol of human endurance, danger, and mystery. Its story teaches a simple truth. Even the most secure walls cannot fully contain the human desire for freedom. And the legend of Frank Morris and the Anglins ensures that Alcatraz will never be forgotten. A prison, a challenge, and a haunting reminder of the risks men take when they dare to escape the impossible. The rock may stand silent now, but its history speaks loudly. Alcatraz tested the limits of humanity, punished those who defied it, and inspired generations to question what freedom truly means. And in the shadows of its corridors, the spirit of those who dared to escape whispers on the wind, keeping the mystery alive for anyone who dares to imagine. As the sun sets over the jagged cliffs of Alcatraz, the waves crash violently against the rocks below, echoing the stories of fear, courage, and mystery that filled this infamous prison. The escape of Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers remains unsolved, a haunting question that still lingers in the cold wind that sweeps across the island. Did they survive the icy waters and vanish into freedom, or did the Bay finally claim them, leaving only legends behind? Alcatraz holds the answers to none, but it reminds us of the extremes of human determination, the cost of defiance, and the unbreakable desire for freedom. Even today, visitors walk its empty halls, peer through barred windows, and feel the weight of history.
The Rock's story continues to captivate, chilling and inspiring all who dare to imagine life behind its walls and the lengths some men will go to escape it. So next time you hear the crashing waves or see the mist over San Francisco Bay, remember Alcatraz, the prison that tested the limits of humanity, punished the daring, and left behind one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. And the question remains, could you have survived the Rock? Don't forget to like and subscribe, and your comment will be great to be seen and reviewed.